I want you to take a second and just visualize retirement.
Right, really picture it in your mind's eye.
Exactly. What do you see? If you are like most people, you are probably picturing a hammock. Maybe a golf course?
Or just sleeping in until 10 in the morning every single day.
Yeah, the overarching theme is usually rest, doing absolutely nothing, kicking back after decades of the daily grind.
We're sold this really pervasive societal idea that the ultimate reward for a lifetime of hard work is essentially a permanent vacation.
But today, we're going to explore a framework that completely shatters that expectation. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we have a fascinating stack of source material in front of us. We're looking at a system called Samaydan, the golden system of purposeful retirement.
And this framework isn't just some modern self-help trend. It's not a Silicon Valley productivity hack. It draws heavily on historical philosophical wisdom.
Specifically, we're looking at texts from a publication called Kanjioti.
Right. For some context here, a Kanjioti is a long-running philosophical and spiritual journal. It's deeply rooted in Indian wisdom traditions. It has spent decades exploring human consciousness, societal duty, and human potential.
And we are focusing on excerpts from their January 1978 edition, which dissects the life of service, and their September 1985 edition, which explores the concept of true retirement.
Yes.
Our mission for you today is to uncover how we can transform the sheer boredom of retirement, or honestly, any period of vast, unstructured free time in your life, into deeply purposeful living through community service.
And that is such a critical mission, because this isn't just about finding a quaint hobby to pass the time. It's not about feeling warm and fuzzy inside.
It's much bigger than that.
Exactly. It is about the very real physiological and psychological impacts of how we spend our time as we age. When we analyze these specific texts from the late 70s and 80s, it becomes clear that the authors were arguing something profoundly structural.
Which is what exactly?
They argue that the way we map out our days in our later years has a direct, measurable effect on our overall survival, our cognitive baseline, and our vitality.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the texts point to a very specific and rather striking milestone. Age 58.
Yes, 58.
The authors highlight 58 as this critical turning point in a person's life. It's the traditional threshold where professional obligation often ends. And to illustrate what usually happens at this milestone, the text paints a vivid, almost haunting picture.
It really does.
I want you to imagine a 60-year-old sitting in a completely silent room. All you hear is the loud, methodical ticking of a grandfather clock. The person is just staring at their watch, looking completely drained.
It's a heavy image.
It is. The text reveals a perspective that flips our modern understanding of aging on its head. It argues that after the age of 58, your biggest enemy is not a physical disease.
Right, it's not cardiovascular decline.
Or joint pain, yeah. The ultimate enemy is empty time.
What's fascinating here is the underlying philosophy of why that empty time is viewed as so destructive. Think about how the human brain operates for the first several decades of our adult lives.
And constantly working.
Constantly. Time is a highly structured tool. We trade our time for resources. Time generates wealth. It forces a rigid daily architecture. It gives us an objective.
We wake up. We have somewhere to be.
Exactly. We have complex problems to solve, and our brains release dopamine and serotonin in response to navigating those daily challenges. But the 1985 text explains that the exact same time, the very mechanism that used to be the engine of your cognitive and financial success suddenly becomes toxic.
Toxic. They literally use the word poison, right?
Yes. The authors describe it as a poison to your health if it passes without a purpose. When the external structure of a career vanishes and you have no objective, that ticking clock becomes a countdown rather than an instrument of progress.
That concept of time becoming a poison is so visceral. And I think even if you are in your 20s or 30s right now, and nowhere near 58 years old, you can fundamentally relate to the mechanics of this.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about a long weekend where you have absolutely nothing planned. At first, the lack of structure sounds amazing.
It sounds like paradise.
Right. But then Saturday rolls around. You sit on the couch, you scroll on your phone, you don't leave the house, you accomplish nothing of substance. By Sunday night, how do you actually feel?
You don't feel rested at all.
No. You're likely experiencing the dopamine deficit of unstructured time. You feel sluggish, drained, maybe even a little anxious or aimless.
Your body literally feels heavier.
Exactly. Now, multiply that Sunday night sluggishness by the thousands of days in a typical 2-decade retirement, and you start to see why the authors classify empty time as a poison.
The human mind and body are simply not designed for perpetual dormancy. We are biological systems built for engagement, for problem solving, and for motion.
We need friction to keep us sharp.
Yes, positive friction. When you permanently remove the engagement, the system starts to turn on itself. This is why the transition around age 58 is framed as so dangerous. Modern society tells you to stop, to rest, to disengage. But your biology demands that you keep moving.
So the lack of purpose creates a psychological vacuum.
And that vacuum is rapidly filled with physical and mental decline. The text from Akhanjodi is warning us that the cessation of meaningful output is the true onset of decay.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the framework doesn't just diagnose the problem of the ticking clock. It offers a solution by completely redefining the word we use for this stage of life.
This is my favorite part of the source material.
Same here. It tells us that retirement is not about resting. In fact, it breaks the word down to its literal components. Retiring, as in putting a completely new set of tires on a vehicle.
Retiring. It's brilliant.
You aren't parking the car in the garage, throwing a tarp over it and leaving it to rust. You are pulling into the pit stop, taking off the worn-out tires that you use for your career, and putting on a fresh set designed for a completely different kind of terrain.
That metaphor fundamentally changes the visual vocabulary of aging. Retiring means preparing your wheels of energy to drive toward a brand new destination. You are still driving, you still have forward momentum, but the payload has changed.
The payload being what you're delivering.
Exactly. You are no longer driving to accumulate wealth or status for yourself. You are driving to distribute value to your community. And the texts are very explicit about how we should view this transition. They don't call this distribution of value a hobby.
No, they don't use that word at all.
They refer to this purposeful, structured approach to aging as a system of life. Capital S. It requires the same level of deliberate engineering that you applied to your career.
Yes, the system. Moving from the external discipline imposed by a boss or a corporation to an internal system of service. And this is deeply rooted in the historical foundations of the text we are exploring today. It's built on a concept called Samaydan.
Right?
Let's break that down for you. In Sanskrit, Samay translates to time, and Dan translates to donation or charity. So Samaydan is the active, intentional donation of your time.
And it's crucial to understand how the January 1978 edition treats this concept of donation. It takes a very powerful, honestly uncompromising stance on human existence.
I was blown away by this passage.
The text states that a person who lives solely for themselves is essentially dead while still breathing.
That is a remarkably heavy philosophical statement, dead while still breathing.
It is heavy, but it cuts right to the core of what the authors believe constitutes actual life. They argue that biological life, just a beating heart, expanding lungs, and a functioning digestive tract, is not true life if it is entirely self-contained.
It's just baseline survival.
Exactly. True vitality in this framework comes from systemic exchange with your environment. The text provides a counterweight to that heavy statement, noting that taking the time to alleviate the sorrows of others fills a person with divine energy.
Wow.
So, when you pull out of that pit stop with your new tires and you actively engage in Samaydan to reduce the friction in the lives of others, you aren't depleting your own tank. You are initiating a flow state that actually sustains your higher functions.
Which brings us to a specific case study in the source material that helps us visualize exactly what this flow state looks like in practice. The authors introduce us to a man named Master Dinelthith.
A great example.
And I want you to picture this scene because the text contrasts it so sharply with the 58-year-old in the silent room with the ticking clock.
Whoa.
We see Master Dinelthith outside, under a large, sprawling tree. The light is dynamic. He is surrounded by a group of local children actively teaching them.
He's fully engaged.
Completely.
Yeah.
In another scene, he is side by side with the local youth, his hands covered in dirt, physically planting saplings in the earth. There is high energy, constant movement, and engagement. He is out in the world, covered in the dust of active community participation.
The contrast is totally deliberate. Dinanath has replaced the isolating poison of the ticking clock with the vitality of the system. He is actively executing Samaydan. But what we need to analyze here is the biological claim the text attaches to this behavior.
This is the part that really caught my eye.
The text states that because of this lifestyle, Master Dinanath physically looks 10 years younger than his actual chronological age.
That stood out to me immediately. It's making a distinct claim that this kind of active service literally turns back the clock. But I have to ask, as someone reading this from a modern perspective, are we meant to take this as a biological truth or just a poetic metaphor for him having a good attitude?
The text presents it as a tangible reality, and if we look at it through the lens of modern science, it actually aligns with what we now understand about psychoneuroimmunology and neuroplasticity.
Okay, break that down for us.
The text describes Samaydan as passing down your treasure of experiences to the new generation. Think about it. By the time you reach 58, you have accumulated decades of complex problem-solving, resilience, emotional intelligence, and highly specific skills.
You have a massive database in your head.
Exactly. If you just sit in a silent room, that cognitive treasure is locked in a vault. The neural pathways associated with those skills begin to prune themselves. Use it or lose it. But when you distribute that treasure, whether through educating children, engaging in physical environmental work like planting saplings, or passing down cultural knowledge, you are demanding that your brain remain highly active.
The text specifically mentions him spreading spiritual and cultural teachings, like the Gayatri Mantra. For context, the Gayatri Mantra is one of the oldest and most revered hymns in the Vedic tradition.
Yep.
It is fundamentally a meditation on illuminating the intellect.
Right.
So by taking the time to teach something as complex and culturally significant as that, you are essentially passing down a cultural operating system to the next generation.
Exactly. You are forcing your brain to retrieve information, process it, and communicate it to a younger audience. That requires immense cognitive flexibility. The source claims that this act of donation causes your very cells to regenerate. It says your cells come alive again.
Come alive. That's a powerful phrase.
When Master Dinanath is planting those saplings or teaching that mantra, he isn't just growing a forest or preserving a culture. He's constantly signaling to his own biology that he is still needed. He's demonstrating to his nervous system that he still has a critical load-bearing function in the ecosystem of his community.
And the body responds to that signal.
It does. When the brain registers that it is essential for the survival or betterment of the group, it maintains structural integrity, it optimizes immune function, it fights off the decay that usually accompanies perceived obsolescence.
So what does this all mean? It means we need to radically update our definition of volunteering. We often treat community service as a nice thing to do if we have some leftover time. A secondary, optional activity.
Something for the weekends.
Right. But according to the framework of Samaydan, giving back is a biological and energetic necessity. Your body and your mind literally require you to be useful to others in order to maintain their own structural integrity. If you want to keep your cognitive sharpness and physical vitality, you have to continually prove to your biology that you are in the game.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it moves this entire discussion from an abstract philosophical ideal into a highly actionable, demanding reality. The 1985 text doesn't just offer beautiful prose about aging gracefully. It demands a concrete pledge.
A real commitment.
Yes, it outlines exactly how to trigger this cellular regeneration. The goal, the specific mandate laid out by the authors, is to commit a minimum of 2 hours every single day to society.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a second, because
Yes.
I know you might be thinking, listening to this. 2 hours a day, every single day. For someone who just spent 40 years grinding out a demanding career, fighting traffic, and dealing with office politics, that sounds less like retiring and more like taking on an unpaid, part-time second job.
I get that.
Doesn't the text address the sheer burnout that a mandate like that might cause?
It's a completely valid pushback, and the framework actually anticipates that resistance. But it draws a sharp distinction between the draining friction of corporate obligation and the energizing flow of voluntary service.
Oh, so.
When you are working a job solely for survival or status, there is an inherent transactional friction that depletes your energy over time. You're doing it because you have to. But Samaydan is voluntary. It operates on a completely different psychological frequency.
It's internally motivated.
Exactly. The 2 hours aren't meant to be a continuation of the corporate grind. They are meant to be a daily exercise in flow and connection. The text emphasizes the word system because it wants you to structure this 2-hour donation of time just as rigorously as you structured your career, but with a fundamentally different internal motivation.
The final, powerful sign-off from the source text is essentially a direct command regarding this structure. Stop making excuses and build the system. We all have a mental Rolodex of excuses ready to go.
Oh, definitely.
I'm too tired. I've paid my dues. I deserve to rest. I don't even know where I would volunteer. The authors cut right through all of that noise. They argue that your excuses are the very poison that will accelerate your decline. The system is the cure.
It requires treating your Samaydan with the same respect and non-negotiable attitude that you treated your 9 to 5 job. During your career, you wouldn't wake up on a Tuesday and just say, I don't feel like going to the office today. I think I'll just stare at the wall.
Right, you'd be fired.
You had a system. You had an obligation. This framework is challenging you to transfer that exact same level of obligation toward the betterment of your community. It posits that if you give your time consistently, you will find deep structural satisfaction, and in return, you will remain energetically vibrant far longer than the person who chooses the hammock.
This raises such a powerful audit to run on our own lives. I want you to consider this right now, regardless of whether you are 25, 45, or 65. How much of your time is actively, systematically donated to the betterment of others? Look at the architecture of your weekly routine.
Are you just living for yourself?
Right. Is there an actual system in place for giving back? Or is it just a vague intention? Something you hope to get around to eventually when things slow down?
This raises an important question about the immediate applicability of these texts. How might integrating this system, even starting with just a small fraction of that 2-hour daily goal, change your current baseline of energy?
It could be transformational.
If the premise holds true that living solely for yourself leaves you dead while breathing, you have to ask yourself, where in your current life are you holding your breath? Where are you hoarding your time and experiencing that sluggish Sunday night dopamine deficit when you could be initiating an energizing flow state through service?
Let's do a quick recap of the expansive ground we've covered today. We started by recognizing the hidden psychological danger of the 58-year milestone. We identified that empty time, not necessarily physical disease, is the ultimate enemy of our later years.
The ticking clock.
Exactly. Then we explored the deep wisdom of the Akan texts to shatter the traditional view of retirement, embracing the literal concept of retiring, putting fresh wheels of energy onto our lives so we can drive toward community value.
Instead of just resting in the garage.
Right. We contrasted the decay of the silent room with the vibrant example of Master Dinanath. We analyzed the profound biological claim that the practice of Samaydan, donating the treasure of our accumulated experiences, signals our necessity to our biology, keeping ourselves young.
The psychoneuroimmunology aspect.
Yes. And finally, we looked at the concrete pledge, committing 2 hours a day to society, dropping the excuses, and building a rigorous daily system of purposeful living.
It truly is a remarkable reframing of the human lifespan. I appreciate how elegantly these historical texts take the aging process, which modern society almost universally treats as a tragic, inevitable period of decline and obsolescence, and transform it into a period of golden, energetic contribution.
It's incredibly empowering.
It changes the entire narrative from a deficit mindset of what have I lost physically to an abundance mindset of what am I now uniquely qualified to give.
It fundamentally changes your relationship with the passage of time. It makes you look forward to the complex problem solving and the wisdom you are gathering right now, knowing that you aren't just surviving. You are building a massive treasure chest of experiences that you will eventually get to open and distribute to the people coming up behind you.
But I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over today. Something that builds directly on the mechanics we've explored in these texts. We've spent this entire deep dive focusing on the 58-year milestone and the traditional concept of retirement.
Right.
But if donating 2 hours a day to society can physiologically and spiritually rejuvenate a 58-year-old, if it can literally signal their biology to maintain structural integrity and reverse their visible age, what would happen if we didn't wait until the end of our careers to start our own Samaydan?
Well, that's a fascinating angle.
What if we implemented a pre-retirement system of daily service in our 20s or 30s? Could we essentially bulletproof ourselves against the poison of purposelessness long before the grandfather clock ever starts ticking?
Now that is a deep dive worth taking on your own. Examine your systems, audit your time, and see where you can start your own Samaydan today. Thank you for exploring this with us. We will see you next time.